Welcome, everyone. We're going to give a few minutes to give a buffer for people to join, but welcome those of you who are already here. I have opened the chat function. So for those of you who have already joined us, if you can start just by sharing your name, the city where you are, and then why is collaborating with the enemy important to you? So if you can start sharing in the chat, we want to hear from you. We want to know where you're coming from and what are the things that you're thinking about when you think about collaborating with the enemy. Hi, Marianne from Winnipeg. Yes, collaborating with the enemy is the best, Jason, and it's very important. Hi, Stephen from Nairobi. Yes. Great to hear that this book was helpful for you, Rosa. Welcome from Dubai. Well, we have people from all over rural Scotland, Amsterdam. Welcome, welcome, everyone. Hi, Alberto in Mexico. Yes, you're right. It's an aspect of daily life. We have to collaborate with the enemy in all different times in different ways. So yes, I'm gonna go ahead. Welcome, everyone. I'm just gonna close the chat for a bit because I want to make sure that we're not distracted, but I think we can go ahead and start. Adam and Ian, welcome. My name is Manuela Restrepo, and I'm very happy to be here today hosting this webinar. I'm a senior consultant at Rios Partners, and I'm based in Cali, in Colombia. Thank you, all of you who decided to join us. Just to let you know, this meeting is being recorded, and you are going to receive an email with the recording later today. So you'll be able to watch it again if you ever feel the need to do so, or for those of you who subscribe but weren't able to join us, you'll be able to access that and afterwards. For those of you who don't know, Rios Partners is an international social enterprise, and we help people move forward together on their most important and intractable challenges. So we design, we facilitate, and guide multi-stakeholder events, processes, and platforms. We operate globally and locally with offices in different places, including Johannesburg, Cambridge, Geneva, London, and Toronto in Canada. We work in very, very different topics such as economic inclusion, education, energy and climate, health and equity, natural resources, land and food, and peace, governance, and democracy. So we have a very, very broad range of issues, and we obviously implement this collaborating with the enemy methodology and processes and thoughts in our work every day. So this today is the official virtual launch of Adam Kahane's much revised and expanded second edition of his best-selling book, Collaborating with the Enemy: How to Work with People You Don't Agree With or Like or Trust. The book was just released last week, but this is the official virtual launch. So thank you, Adam, for this. I know that we had originally said that we were going to have 3 people. So unfortunately, Siobhan Wilkinson, who's the artist behind the book, the drawings in the book, couldn't join us today. But we're lucky enough that we get to hear from Adam. He's going to present the book, and from Ian, who designed all the practical exercises that we have in the book. So where hopefully this is going to help you understand a little bit better the why and the how of the things that you're going to be able to read in the book. And it's going to inspire you not only to use it in your work, but like someone said in the chat, in your everyday life is going to be practical for you. So we're looking forward to hearing from you, Adam and Ian, and I'll hand it over to you in a bit. Just to let you know, like I said earlier, I'm going to turn off the chat, and then you're going to be able to add your questions in Q&A. So we're going to hear from Adam first, and we're going to hear from Ian, and then we're going to get a chance to get some of your questions and respond to them. And like always, we're in social media. If you want to stay in communication, you can tag at Rios Partners and hashtag collaborating with the enemy. And we would be excited to be able to continue a conversation with you guys there. So welcome everyone. Adam, welcome. What can you share about this new edition and why you felt the need to revisit the original version of the book, which we all loved and know so much? So I'm going to stop sharing so you can start sharing yours. Yes.
Thank you, Manuela. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be able to launch this book globally today. Lots of wonderful work together over the past 18 months with hundreds of members of what I've been calling the Book Creating Club, all of whom are acknowledged by name in the back of the book. And with this webinar to be launching the Book Using Club, and we'll explain how that will kick off in February at the end of this call. When I say this is the global online launch, there have been a few weeks of in-person launch events. The first was in Banff, Alberta, a few weeks ago. For years, I've been getting emails from fanatical users of the book from a particular subset of the community of divorce lawyers who have been trying to find ways for people to collaborate across difference, even when they have already decided they can't live together anymore. So there was a global conference of this subset of the divorce lawyer community, which was the actual in-person global launch, and then a bunch of events in Dubai at the Dubai Future Forum, which is a big global event, and then very interestingly, for me, the first time in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and presenting this text in the Gulf was an education for me. Why did I write a second edition? Well, there are two reasons. Firstly, there were always things about the first edition that I wasn't happy about, I guess you could say from an aesthetic point of view. I thought it wasn't my best book. It was definitely my best title, but not my best book. And in life, you don't often get a chance for a do-over. But when Barrett Kohler invited me to make the second edition, I accepted on the condition that I could change it as much as I needed to. I think they thought it would be a few new sentences, a few updates, but it's actually over 50% new, including new drawings by Siobhan Wilkinson and a whole big section of practical exercises by Ian that he'll talk about. And the second reason that I was keen to update it is it seems that the world has caught up with the book. The book's 7 years old, and yet in August of this year, it was among the top 500 books on Amazon worldwide, which is a bit of an incredible statistic. And I think that just says something about how this title resonates in the current context. I think that collaborating across difference is becoming increasingly important and at the same time increasingly difficult. And so the gap between the collaboration we need and the collaboration we think we're able to do is growing, and this book offers a way to bridge that gap. So I'm just going to go through some of the major changes to the book in about 15 minutes, and then Ian will contribute, and then look forward to the conversation with all of you. So when I started to rewrite the book a year ago, I sent out a note to previous readers, including on LinkedIn, and I said, what should I keep from the first edition and what should I add? And I got back several messages and said, well, actually, I didn't read very far in the first edition, but that first chart you have on page 8, that's really good. Could you please keep it in? And this is the chart that was on page 8 and is now, again, the first chart in the new edition, and it makes what is indeed, in my opinion, a fundamental point, which is that it's not possible or sensible to collaborate with everybody on everything. And so the question, when do we collaborate, is crucial, and to realize that collaborating is not our only option. Probably we all use all four of these options in any given week, often move back and forth between them. So this is the again in the second edition, and makes this point, which is a big relief for people who had been thinking, that collaboration is the only way to deal with things. This is obviously not true. And so this chart remains important. In the book, I make the point, which is not only a point of vocabulary, but to me a central point, that when you look collaborating up in the dictionary, you realize there's two definitions. The first is to work jointly with, and if you do a Google search on collaboration, you get images like this of people listening to energetic young men in pastel colored shirts. It looks creative, it looks productive, it looks enjoyable. But I remember literally from the time I was a child of having seen this other image. This is a photograph taken in Brittany after the Second World War of two women who were accused of being collaborators, who had their heads shaved and their clothes torn and were marched down the middle of the street. Because the second definition of collaboration is cooperating traitorously with the enemy. And for me, this double meaning of the word collaboration is not just incidental dictionary matter. It brings up the central tension in collaborating across difference, which is, on the one hand, we think we might need to do so to get where we're trying to go. But on the other hand, we worry that doing so will result in us being traitors, or being seen as traitors, either by ourselves or more, or by others. And somebody pointed out to me that to be a traitor is worse than being an enemy, because you are betraying your own people. So I consider this to be the core tension in collaborating across difference. Another big change in the second edition is that I decided to take the word enemy, which is only in the title of the first edition, and look at it more carefully. And I had the pleasure last September of having a writing fellowship at the Parish Institute of Advanced Study. And I told the other fellows that I was here to begin work on a new edition of a book called Collaborating with the Enemy, How to Work with People You Don't Agree With or Like or Trust. And one of the fellows, an urban historian from Romania named Groia Badescu, made a comment that really changed my whole understanding of the subject. He said, Adam, your subtitle, How to Work with People You Don't Agree With or Like or Trust, makes it sound like collaborating across difference is an extraordinary and unusual activity that you have to read a whole book about. He said, from my perspective as an urban historian, working with people you don't agree with or like or trust is actually the very definition of a city. And I thought he's right, that in a city, most of the time, we work with people we may or may not agree with or like or trust. And so I think, in a way, one of the messages of the book that's become clear to me as I presented it over the past few weeks, and that I'll come back to at the end of this little presentation, is that we should stop thinking about collaborating cross difference as an extraordinary, difficult matter and understand it to be an everyday matter, sometimes easy, sometimes not. And also to stop dividing the world, as I see increasingly the case, into black and white between people with whom we can collaborate and people with whom we can't collaborate, friends and enemies, and understand that in practice, the world is made up of many shades of gray, of people with whom, under particular circumstances, we might need to collaborate. Now, this is the single biggest change in the second edition of the book. In the first edition, I said that conventional collaboration is becoming increasingly obsolete. And I think that was completely incorrect. And in the book, I tell the story of how I realized that, actually unexpectedly in a very ordinary work setting in Dubai. But I now think that conventional collaboration, which I'll define in the next slide, works perfectly well in ordinary team situations, whether it's a sports team or an orchestra or a surgical team or a work team, where complexity is low and conflict is low. Conventional collaboration is an excellent approach to working together in those particular circumstances. But in cases where complexity is high and or conflict is high, conventional collaboration does not and cannot work, and a different approach, a fundamentally different approach, which I call stretch collaboration, is required. And this is the biggest change in the conceptual architecture of the book, that collaborating across difference is not impossible. There isn't only one way to collaborate across difference. There are, in fact, two excellent ways to collaborate across difference when you want to collaborate in these two types of circumstances. The other big change in the book, those of you who worked with me before or read my work, and I saw in the list of attendees that there's many of you that contributed to the text. So thank you for coming and thank you for your contributions. And probably half of you are people that I've encountered in person or online. So that was lovely. And so you will know that I have for 20 years been trying to unpack the relationship between love, power, and justice. I wrote a book called Power and Love. I've tried several times to make a synthesis. I wasn't happy with the results, but I think I've now got it, at least got it as far as I can get it. And the way I would summarize it is the following: that if there was an operating manual for collaboration, like an operating manual for a dishwasher, the front cover of the operating manual would say, collaborating across difference requires working with love and power and justice. So there's a new chapter in the second edition, chapter 2 or chapter 3, which elaborates this point. But this is the easiest way to understand the difference between conventional and stretch collaboration. In conventional collaboration, collaborators are expected to fit in to the collaboration. The collaborators need to subordinate themselves to the collaboration to be good team players. And what's crucial is that the collaboration is seen as sufficiently safe and fair. Whereas in stretch collaboration, these same three elements are involved: love, power, and justice. But in stretch collaboration, we need to nurture the belonging of the collaborators in the collaboration. We need to recognize each collaborator's autonomy and agency, and we need to structure the collaboration for equity and reciprocity. So that's the quick summary of the difference as I've now, I think, clarified it in the second edition. And then the other comparison, this is actually the same as the first edition. Two different ways of engaging with our collaborators, engaging with our context, engaging with ourselves. All of the charts I'm showing you are in the text of the book. Um, and stretch collaboration involves not simply or not only prioritizing the goals and harmony of the team as a whole, but embracing conflict as well as connection. Um, uh, uh, Not simply agreeing on the problem, the solution, and the plan on who will do what, but experimenting a way forward. And most fundamentally, not simply giving and following directions, but stepping into the game. And then the final slides I'll show are the illustrations by Siobhan Wilkinson. You might recall from the first edition that it had a little picture of a dog and a cat, which we thought was a lighthearted way of talking about a potentially heavy topic. And so Siobhan and I worked together to take that image forward. A conventional collaboration, focusing on the harmony of the team, and stretch collaboration, each playing their role, perhaps with discomfort, in order to be able to achieve the objective. A stretch two, where you know where you're trying to go. It might be complicated, but you follow the plan. Whereas stretch collaboration uses this remarkable image from Deng Xiaoping, the former head of the Chinese Communist Party, where he described the economic transition in China, not as I would have thought the head of a Chinese Communist Party would do so, by saying we're strictly following a plan, but he used the phrase, which is apparently well known in Chinese, we're crossing the river feeling for stones, implying that the stones might not even be visible to us. They're under the water. We have to literally feel our way forward. And finally, and most fundamentally, a conventional collaboration involves telling people what to do and doing what you're told, whereas stretch collaboration involves being aware of your own role in the game and focusing on what you yourself will do in order to move forward. This was first pointed out to me by Bill Torbert. Some of you may know him, passed away a few weeks ago, and who said to me maybe 30 years ago, you know that old expression, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem, Adam? He said, well, that's actually not the key point. The key point is, if you're not part of the problem, you can't be part of the solution. If you don't see how what you're doing or not doing is contributing to the way things are, then it follows logically there's nothing you can do to change the way things are, except from the outside by force. So that's the third stretch. Let me just, make one final point. I deliberately turned off the slide. So here's how I now would summarize the book. This is a bit differently than how the text ends, but having presented it now for the last several weeks, I think there's another way to summarize the basic or the key message of the book. And this has come to me because the most frequent question I get in when I present the book is, how can we collaborate? How is it possible to collaborate? People ask this question with frustration and disbelief. How is it possible to collaborate if we don't agree on terminology, words, what words mean, what words to use? We don't agree on the problem, on the solution, on the plan, if we don't have the same purpose. And especially, I've asked this question over and over, how could we possibly work with people with whom we don't agree on values? And I think what the book is saying is, yes, it would certainly be easier if we agreed on some or all of those things, But contrary to popular belief, it is not necessary to agree on those things in order to be able to work together. This, in a way, was Groya Badescu's point to me last September. Now, I'll just end by saying that I was, as I said earlier, in Dubai and Riyadh the last 2 weeks, and I don't willy-nilly end my speeches with quotes from the Quran, but I was very taken that several people came up to me and said, you know, this thing you're talking about, there is a very well-known passage in the Quran that makes exactly the point, or actually was put more interestingly, you're describing the how, this passage describes the why. And the passage, which some of you may know, it's very well known. It's from Surah Al-Hujurat, reads as follows. It says, O humanity, indeed we created you from a male and female and made you into peoples and tribes so that you may get to know one another. And of course, in English, this so that you may says that diversity is not a, I can use software language, is not a bug. Differences and diversity are not a bug, they're a feature. And Arabic speakers who told me that said, no, that's exactly the correct translation into English, that our diversity, which we often view as a problem, is in fact a solution. So that's the spirit with which I present this new edition, collaborating across difference, collaborating with the enemy, and turn it over to Ian. Over to you, Ian.
Thanks, Adam. So, hi, everyone. Great. Well, I was going to say great to see you, but great to feel you and know that you're all out there. I think we're going to go to the next slide, which has the...
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. There you go.
Okay. So when Adam and I were first talking about the new edition and looking to bring in the idea of practices more explicitly and more sort of integrated throughout the book, what we started talking about were these 10 choices for collaborating across difference. And I'll read them out. I know you can all see them, but just to sort of have them in the air as well. So whom do you see as enemies? When will you employ collaborating? With whom will you collaborate? How will you work with love, power, and justice? Where will you employ conventional collaboration? Where will you employ stretch collaboration? How will you stretch to embrace conflict and connection? How will you stretch to experiment a way forward? How will you stretch to step in the game? Will you abide? So those 10 questions, and right now I'm going to read just a little section from the book as well, because I think it really encapsulates the sort of the power and the sort of the center of these questions within the book and within the sort of as a jumping off place for the practices. These 10 choices don't fit into a single, simple, straightforward decision tree. They can't be mapped or planned in advance, and there's no formula for what to do when. They are moves that you need to choose from based on a particular situation you're in at a particular moment as you're feeling your way through it. So these are laid out within the narrative sort of structure of the book. And they are, but I think the important point about them is that they are choices and questions you are going to encounter, or you do encounter, all the way through complex situations where you are collaborating across difference. And these questions ask for a response. And depending on the context, it can feel that the response is demanded and requires an immediate answer. The practices in the book they invite you to step back and reflect before you make your choice. They help to increase that space between question and response. Since space creates possibility, and when we open up a space of possibility, our responses, therefore, can expand. They can become intentional, context-based, possibly surprising, maybe even challenging, but rather than habitual. And I'd say this is, again, one of the sort of the key intentions behind the practices. How do we all take the time to step back and create new understanding and new perspective within ourselves and with others? Now, these practices, they can be engaged with individually. You yourself can engage with them around these questions and come to your own new understandings. You can do them across your team or even across a coalition so that it becomes a collective understanding of what is our response to these questions. They're designed within the book to be a reflective, conversationally based practice, but could easily be adapted into more embodied practices. And I encourage, invite, and hope you will take them as a starting point to play with them. And I'd say, finally, one of the other things is that the stretching always does start with ourselves, but it doesn't end there. Sustainable change happens when we not only look at our own patterns, but also what are the systems, relationships, and spaces to help others stretch too. We always are going to start with ourselves, but also understand what is the collective that we are a part of and how can we bring to that a sense of space, possibility, and stretch. So with all of that, I will wrap up and I'll hand it over to you, Manuela, for questions and answers.
Great, Ian. Thank you. And thank you, Adam, for sharing all that with us. I think that there's a lot of conversation, a lot of questions already coming in through the Q&A. So the way that we're going to do this is that I'm going to share 3 questions and I'll open up the space for you both to answer. We can see that some of them are related. Some of them maybe require a little bit more of your experience. But we'll do that and we'll do as many rounds as we get before we reach the end of the hour. Does that work? And just for everyone, I've been typing the ones that are more technical about the book or where to get it on chat, and I'll respond to them directly and I have it visible so that everyone else can see. So the first 3 questions that I want to share with you. The first one is, are there differences you see in what works in high conflict, low complexity relations versus low conflict, high complexity relations? So we know that, Adam, you shared about this in the divorce lawyers, and we know that we've used it in many other places. So maybe giving people a little bit of a how you notice the difference. Then there was this other really good question about what is your view on the role of the addressing or processing losses for the enemy may be taking in order to make progress on the challenge or the challenges. So when we talk about winners and losers, how is the process of going with people so that you can keep moving forward as opposed to getting stuck? And then can you share more about how and where justice shows up into stretch 1, 2, and 3? So I'll have those 3 questions, and then I'll let you both speak and we can come back afterwards. Adam, if you want, we can start with you.
Boy, I was expecting some easier ones. Yeah. High conflict, low complexity versus low conflict, high complexity. Yes, well, I guess I would simply say that the whole phenomena viewing other as an enemy, which is the opening image in the book. And I talk about this not just seeing others as having a different perspective or being wrong or being bad, but actually even being evil. And if somebody's not just wrong but the devil, then how could I possibly work with them? And this phenomena, which I guess when you write a book, you're allowed to make up one new word. So the new word I made up in this book was enemify, the process of viewing others as enemies. And I took this more seriously in the second edition than the first edition. We do have some enemies. There are people who are trying to hurt or injure us. But one of the problems, one of the reasons this is all getting more difficult is I see a tendency to apply that label enemy very broadly, not just to people who are actually and seriously trying to hurt or injure us, but people who are inconveniencing us or who we don't agree with or we don't like or who we find uncomfortable. So in as much as this dynamic of enemifying is the hardest edge of this, and what makes everything else seem impossible, then I guess the high conflict is more difficult than the high complexity. But nonetheless, high complexity is also challenging for collaboration because you don't know what will work. You need multiple perspectives. You need everybody to play their own role. So the three stretches apply to both cases, high conflict and high complexity. But I guess the really, I don't know, emotionally, the difficult and seemingly dangerous part is the high conflict, and that's what's getting attention. I haven't thought about the question of the role of addressing losses for the enemy. Very often, I see Dr. Kalia is on the call from Thailand. What I noticed when Ian and I worked in Thailand is that everybody thought that they were the ones being badly treated. So often everybody's feeling like a victim, everybody's feeling like they're being badly treated, and that their losses must be addressed. And I guess I would say, I don't think this is a complete answer, but that I would say simply understanding how the problematic situation looks to different actors, almost always view the situation as problematic from different perspectives for different reasons, and finding a way forward involves not necessarily agreeing, but okay, I get now why you're doing what you're doing. I don't like it. I don't agree with it. I wish you would stop. I'm going to try to block you, but I get it now. And I see, okay, there might be this way forward that wasn't clear to me when I didn't understand why you find this so difficult or why you feel that you're being hard done by. As for the question of justice, the challenge of using the words love, power, and justice is they're used in many different ways. I've used very specific definitions that I got from Martin Luther King Jr. or via Martin Luther King Jr. from Paul Tillich. It's explained in chapter 3. But justice, as I'm using it, has to do with the structure or the form of the collaboration, and a structure or form that enables everybody to have agency and everybody to have connection. In other words, everybody to employ their power and their love. But that's, I can't, unpacking that more precisely, it takes more words than I have, but that's pretty precisely unpacked in that chapter.
Great.
Anything to add, Ian?
No, I think you've done it all very well. I guess from my perspective, it's always with the last one about love, power, and justice. It's a question of, I think, sometimes more the practices you put in place that you adhere to, rather than there's oftentimes I'll see people want to have the intention, and intention is important, but intention without practice can sometimes get diverted.
Mm, mm. Thank you, Adam and Ian. I'm seeing a lot of questions come in that are related to in practice how it works. So I don't know if both of you could share a little bit of examples where you can help people understand how this works in practice. Particularly what I'm seeing a lot of in the questions is when the other is not willing. I know that there's a lot that you unpack in the book about this, Adam, but there's this sense of how to bring the other to the conversation on where they're in, and you don't feel that they're in good faith. How do you continue? So there's this, the othering is quite present, I think, in the questions, but it's just how to bring the other to be part of a conversation. And then so there's many questions around that, and I'm asking it in a more broad and general way, and maybe with examples it can be helpful for people. And I think another one, because we know that AI is everywhere, and someone is asking, what role can AI play in the process? So Ian, I know that you thought a lot about the exercises or the questions, but I don't know if there's something that comes to you when you think about that question as well. So I can open it up to you. And if you want, we can start, Ian, with you with the AI, and then we go, Adam, with you in the more practical.
Ian is really the expert on AI in this domain. So
I
please.
know that's, yeah.
So I'll share what my perspective is on AI and its use. I think AI is very useful for extending work and extending thought, not for replacing. So I don't see AI right now as doing anything to replace what people are doing together. It's not going to come to the decision or identify what the best way is forward. But I think it can be very useful in being able to help us get new perspectives and ask questions. I often think of it as a great first generation or first draft generator. So as I was going through the questions earlier, I was thinking about AI, the practice questions. AI could be used very easily as a custom GPT to actually set up the questions so that you ask, the questions are asked, you give your response, it uses those, it generates the next question based on your past response. And in that way, you get into a conversation. So I think the more we can think about how are we going to use AI in which to extend our conversations or bring in new perspectives rather than replacing the work that needs to be done, that becomes very interesting.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you. Let me address the other question about what do you do if you want to collaborate and the other is not willing to collaborate? And this question occurs very often, partly because it's often chronologically the first question in a collaboration. And I've thought about it a lot, and I think there's some things in the book about it. So I'll just make 4 points quickly. Firstly, the framing that the problem here is really the other person or the other parties, might be true, but it's also the typical enemy-fying framing that I'm okay, I'm doing reasonable things, it's those other people. And a long time ago, actually exactly 20 years ago, I was involved in a big, complicated RIOS project in India, 96 stakeholders from government and business and civil society and communities on child malnutrition. I got a lot of pressure, very confused. And I went to an Indian mentor of mine, Arun Maira, and I asked him, Arun, what are we doing here? And he had a very helpful answer. He said, Adam, when we enter a multi-stakeholder space like this, 100% of the people assume that the problem is the other people. If only those other people would change what they're doing, we'd be fine. But if we're all here, it's not mathematically possible that it's all other people's fault. So what we're really doing here is helping people understand how they might need to do something different in order for the situation to change. And Ian has introduced an excellent practice for doing exactly that in the practices around stretch 3. So that's one answer. Secondly, What often happens, or what I say in the book, and is I think underappreciated, is power imbalances have a very major impact on whether collaboration is seen as an important choice or a necessary option. That if I can get what I want to go by acting unilaterally, by forcing, then why would I want to work with people who I find difficult or troublesome, or who I think of as enemies? I mean, some people would, but most people wouldn't or don't. And so, another way to say that is collaboration most often occurs when the parties have a similar power, maybe power of different sorts. And so, if I want to collaborate, but the other party thinks that they can get what they want without working with me, then perhaps what I need to do is to change that equation for them. Uh, for example, by building a coalition with countervailing power. I tell the story about the early convening of the Sustainable Food Lab, where the Workers Without Land group said they saw the need for the multi-stakeholder collaboration we were proposing, but they didn't want to do it until they had more power. So they were going to continue to mobilize so that when they did come to the table, they'd be taken seriously. The final thing I'll say about this is I have very few actual prescriptions to give, but this is the one thing where I have a real tip to give, which is the following. And it's so simple, but people rarely do it. Usually when I'm dealing with somebody who I think is wrong and ought to be doing something different, I'm spend all of my energy trying to figure out how am I going to convince them or woo them or force them to get into line. And the alternative is to take just an hour out of your life and approach them in a spirit of inquiry and ask them, how do you see the situation? This is the essence of the dialogue interviews that are often the foundation for Rios's work that Manuel does so brilliantly. People are very surprised, especially when they're used to being harangued, to actually be asked, how do you see the situation? And you may well find that they also view the situation as problematic, although perhaps for a completely different reason than you do. Or maybe it's not problematic, but it could become problematic. And there's your opening. So the point is, it's not necessary to agree on the problem or the solution. It's only necessary to agree that the situation is problematic and maybe we can address it better together than separately. You may find after spending that hour that you still disagree, you still don't like them, you still don't trust them. You're going to fight them with everything you've got. You're going to try to destroy them. But you're giving yourself the opportunity to see whether maybe there's another way to approach this situation that was not visible to you before.
Perfect. Thank you, Adam. We have 10 minutes left, and I see there's many very interesting questions. So I'm just trying to go through them and see what connects. So I'm just going to read 3 more that we just got that I think are very strong and can help deepen the reflection. So in Dutch, we have a saying that translates something like unknown makes unloved. How important is becoming known to each other in a multi-stakeholder situation, and what is most important way to achieve that? So I think that we do that quite a bit, and I'm sure that you can expand on how that is. And then there's another person who wrote, people often still use phrases like, let's focus on a win-win situation. From your book and your examples in facilitating breakthrough, it seems that win-win is too simplistic or wrong or objective or mindset. So maybe we can share a little bit more of that. And Ian and Adam, that was most beautiful set of statements, especially for Ian. How did you arrive at this most interesting and profound understanding of interdependence? And Adam, what helped you from your understanding of peace and justice? So I know those are heavy, but I know that we can bring some of our experience and the work to those and some of the reflections that you used. So, Ian, I'm gonna go over to you if that's okay, so that because Adam just spoke.
Okay, just on the first one about unknown is unloved, I would agree 100%.
Mhm.
You know, the most radical move we can do, as Adam just said, is to understand and connect with the other person. And there's somebody that asked one of the first questions about cognitive science. There's a term I love in cognitive science, which is asymmetric insight, right? Which boils down to I'm complicated, you're stupid. Um, and it's that thing about like we see ourselves as complicated, diverse individuals, and like what if we brought that same understanding to the other person? And processes that help us to do that, that opens up the space of possibility in a big way. Going to the question about the need for interdependence. So my original background was in theater. I used to be a theater director for a number of years. And there's a lot that I bring from that world into this world. And one of the key ones is that the thing about a group of people coming together to create is that they are creating both individually and collectively. And that is a fundamental aspect of sort of the fuel that brings the creation to life. That they're doing their own work, they're discovering individually, and then together they're bringing that with others and being influenced and changed by them. So I think always paying attention to sort of individual and collective and the dynamic between those two is again something fundamental in the work we do to create meaningful change in the world.
Thanks. I'll respond briefly. I think I say this somewhere in the book, or in one of my books, that I do think the phrase win-win is problematic in that it makes these things sound easier than they are, or sound more obvious than they are. There's a phrase I use so often in the book that the copy editor told me I have to start putting in the text, as I have said before. So the phrase I use so often that it required that injunction from the editor was, this is not straightforward. And often it involves collaborating across difference, involves pain, sacrifice, compromise, trade-offs. Yeah, maybe that's the most important word, trade-offs. Not simply, here's a magic solution nobody'd ever thought of where everybody's simply better off. So I'll leave it at that. Unknown makes unloved. Somebody said that to me a few weeks ago. Maybe it's the same person asking the question. I can't remember. Or maybe everybody in the Netherlands says that. But one of the things that's always interested me, and I write about this in the book, is that of all the complicated workshop exercises we do, small groups, large groups, hexagons, Lego, dialogue, et cetera, scenarios, the one that people often say they like most is the simplest, which is a paired walk, which is look around the room, find the person most different from you who you thought you'd never be able to talk to, and go for a walk with them for 45 minutes. And people always say, that was useful. The facilitation stuff, it's okay, but could we have more of the paired walks? So I really started to wonder, what's with the paired walks? And my first explanation was, well, in a paired walk, you're walking through the world, you're looking at it together, you're not on your phone or looking at a piece of paper, you're having to make choices about, do we go this way or that way? And that's all true, but there's a more fundamental reason, which was pointed out to me by Lucila Cerviche, with whom Manuela and I worked in Mexico, a radical Catholic theologian, who said, Adam, you're missing the point. The key thing about the paired walk is the sequence. In the paired walk, first you're connecting as fellow human beings, and then maybe we'll change our understanding or relationship or actions. She said that's the opposite of the Catholic confessional, where first you admit you're wrong, and secondly, you're readmitted to the communion. So I do think that connecting as fellow human beings is crucial. And I always used to hate or think icebreakers were silly, but working with Ian convinced me that it's really very important, as Ian always says, as you've heard him say before, the enemies of creativity are formality and hierarchy. So the walk and other ways too. And as for what helped me, I would say very briefly that I was initially focused more on peace than on justice. And I realized, actually, it was from a Dutch person. Maybe he's the one who asked the question. It was Yannick Wasmer, who said to me, Adam, you have to realize that these situations look very different for people for whom the system is working and for whom the system is not working, or for whom the system is working against. And so I've understood that in the world and in this work and in structuring collaborations, the structuring for reciprocity, structuring for fairness, structuring in a way that allows everybody to have agency and connection is crucial. If I think I'm being treated unjustly, I simply won't contribute, or I'll sabotage, and collaboration has no hope. Let's end there.
Great, thank you. So unfortunately, we're running out of time for questions. So I don't know if there's any closing thoughts, Ian and Adam, that you want to go before we go to. Great. So I'm just going to go ahead and share again my screen. Sorry about this, because I have the QR code. So many of you have asked about the book, where to get it, where to find it. Sorry, I'm having trouble now with this. And so we created this for you. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my screen now. Here you go. I hope people can see the QR code.
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. So if you want to order the book, you can use the QR code on the left. I'm going to share on chat the links as well in a minute. But if you want to use your QR code, the one on the left. And Adam, if you want to introduce the super user study group that you'll be having in February, then we can do that, because people can use the link on the right hand to do that.
Yes, thanks. This is quite simple. The book is available worldwide, paperback, audio, ebook. You can get it from any bookseller, but there are some specific links behind that QR code. And for those of you who want to work on using the book, Ian and I will be running a free super user study group in February that you can register for people who want to work with global colleagues and get into this in more depth and put it into practice and help spread the word. So all of the information is given in that second QR code and second link. We did this last year with Everyday Habits for Transforming Systems. It was a lot of fun. So if you want to go further, feel free to join us 3 consecutive weeks in February, 3 one-hour Zoom calls.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So you have the link in chat and you have the QR code. And then I'm going to go ahead and share if you want to continue the conversation in social media, you can use the at Rios Partners or hashtag collaborating with the enemy. And before we head out, we wanted to ask people in the last couple of minutes, I opened the chat again, if you can share one thing you're taking away from today's webinar, either an insight or a question. And I know there were some questions that we were unable to respond. So, but if hopefully the way that Ian and Adam answer them, it allowed you to see a little bit of the broader context of the mechanics of the why, the how, and how to make these things happen. But if you want, just before leaving, yes, just sharing. Thank you, Marco. Yes, the enemies of creativity are formality and hierarchy. Ian's brilliant work. And justice enables everybody to deploy the power under love. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Rosa. Spades creates possibility. That's absolutely. Yes, Jason, it's about trying things out and being open to learning something new. Yes, the most radical move is to understand others. That's, yeah. Great. So you can continue sharing. Thank you, those of you who joined us who have to leave. Thank you, Ian and Adam, for your brilliant thoughts. Like always, it's a pleasure hearing you and learning with and from you. So thank you. Craig,
Thanks,
you
everyone.
asked for
Thanks,
something in
Manuela.
chat.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
everybody.
everyone. Bye.